Greetings, this is Chris Ruby with another Isaac Asimov story review. This one, well, it's still a short story, um, but it's a fairly long one, but I think probably one of his best in a very long time. I personally like it. I don't know why it doesn't get more attention. It got the cover, by the way, of Astounding Science Fiction, and I think the only other times he's had the cover of Astounding Science Fiction in quite some time is when he serialized his novels, The Currents of Space and then The Naked Time. So, but other than that, he hasn't had an astounding cover in a long time, as you can see. But here he has it. And the story is called Profession, and we'll talk a little bit about that. The Profession is kind of an unusual story, not probably for Asimov, but I think it's not the kind of story you usually see. I think it's a perfect thing for someone to read if they're like a junior high, high school, or even in college, which is when I first read it. And as we go through the story, you'll see some of why. We have this young guy here, and here he is on the cover. His name is George Platen. This guy. This is George Platen, and he's wandering around in a very futuristic-looking San Francisco. Amazing they still call it that after all those years, but I guess these are the futuristic things. I mean, these are all people, with different kinds of clothing, reflecting maybe different kinds of occupations and learned this and that, and so on and so forth. And in fact, the artist who drew this cover also did the artwork for the story itself, which, as we see, is featured actually as a short novel. There it is, Profession, and by Isaac Asimov on page 8. So we go to page 8, and here we are. This is another piece of scenery from about the same time. Again, here's George in the foreground. Looking about the confusion of all these people. You notice even their clothes are kind of similar. For when he does a black and white drawing, he's got this sort of stylized line drawing sort of effect. It's actually kind of neat. And there's all these different people. You can see they've kind of got, again, a futuristic view of San Francisco and kind of funny looking hats and clothing that are very consistent with what's on the cover, because it is the same artist. When he does the color, he draws normally and realistically. When he draws black and white, he does these line drawings. So, and there's several more during the story, which is really cool. I like it when they have a nicely illustrated like this. So George, he lives in this world. Education is handled very differently. When you're 10 years old, it's called reading day. They just put this thing on your head, and they do this for everybody when you're 10, and it just goes zap, and suddenly you can read. Before you couldn't. Just like that. Bam. And that's it. They call that reading day. Then you get so much older, like 18 or something like that, I think, and you go in again for what they call education day. This is where you're going to get everything about how to do whatever your job is going to be for the rest of your life. Here we have a picture of George as a young boy going into reading day. You see all this very, there's the guy there looking like some sort of grandmaster wizard sort of thing, with all this very exotic, sophisticated machinery with dials and indicators and every sort of wires. And there's little George as a little kid sitting in this chair with wires on his head, kind of fearful, but at the same time knowing that everybody does this, so it can't get too bad. And so later on, you go into reading day, education day, and it's on that day this thing electronically looks at your brain and just figures out what sort of skill you'd be best suited for it. And then it just assigns that and injects everything you need to know about whatever that is, and now you know everything. But George has something happen to him that's very shocking. See, he would sometimes ask his father when he was a kid, they have this competition for people who've gone through education days in the last year or two, and it kind of helps them place themselves. How well did they get it? How well can they perform with the knowledge that they've gained and so forth? How well have they oiled it a bit by kind of practicing with it and so forth, and kind of, loosening things up a little bit by having just done it a lot and so forth and so on, and how efficient and smart and fast are they? Because they have to be accurate and they have to be quick. And if you're one or the other or both of these things, preferably, you can win what they call the Olympics. And this is kind of it's an interesting Olympics. It's a career-based Olympics rather than just simple athletic prowess. So it's a different Olympics. And he asked his dad, well, why is it called Olympics? Well, it's a competition. Well, is that like when I'm having a fight with my best friend, Stubby Trevelyan? No, that's different. This is more official and blah, blah, blah. Don't ask such stupid questions. I don't know what kind of parent would talk like that to a kid, but I guess you had that a lot in those old days. So, anyway, he's looking forward to that. He says, well, you'll learn all about it when you get educated. Yeah, when you get educated. He didn't say if you get educated, because George got to this thing, they looked at him, and they said, we're not going to do this. We can't do this with you. And he's like, what? What does that mean? Well, he doesn't understand. He was looking forward, probably coming out as a programmer. That's a very elite position in those days. He could have gone to one of the great Class A planets out there. Novia is a very popular one. His best friend hopes to go there as a prime metallurgist, and he'd be very good at it. His family had been metallurgists, and probably he'll be one too. In fact, we find later on he does become a metallurgist in his education. His friend Stubby or Armand Trevelyan. But here we are. Something goes astray. So, wait a minute, how can you do this? It's not fair. Well, yeah, we can do whatever we like. And they grab these guys and they're giving it an injection, some sort of a sedative to kind of get them under control. Wow. So these guys just come out of nowhere with a little, they grab him, restrain him, and put a little needle in him, and suddenly he goes to sleep. Well, he wakes up in this house, which after a while we learn is the house for the feeble-minded. Because it turns out there are a tiny percentage of others who cannot and should not be educated. So he just sits there and says, why did they do this to him? And he's all miserable and angry. Why did that guy, hate me so much? And because the guy there evaluating him was kind of like, you read books? You studied on this subject? Like, how dare you? What's wrong with you? Kind of an atmosphere. But at any rate, that's where he is. He's in that house for more than a year. Let's see here. Education Day takes place in October, and every May they have the Olympics. And the first May of Olympics comes and goes, and he's just so wallowing in his despair he doesn't even notice. But by the second time it comes along, he's had enough. He's got to get out there. He's got to find some way to make something of himself. He's going to do something. He's not going to just sit there and be content to be a feeble-minded nothing. Everybody else is registered, whatever. Registered metallurgist in the case of his friend. So he goes somewhere. He travels to some far-off city, San Francisco, and goes to that and happens to see there's the name of his friend up there. Novia is holding a competition for metallurgist. And here we have another drawing. This is pretty neat. We now get a little glimpse of his friend Trevelyan trying to work this thing like crazy. He's fighting. It's a competition, like he's running, you see. But the competition here is to work this piece of equipment, whatever that is, which the problem was he was educated for a Hensler machine, which is last year's model. And the problem is now he's being tested, and they're looking for people who've been educated with the new Beeman model. So he's struggling to try to figure out a Beeman model. The difference between the two is negligible, but he's not educated in the Beeman model, so he's really having to scramble and he ends up not competing very well, and they have a rather interesting meeting because it's been a while since they've seen each other, and they've kind of been, I don't know, friends, enemies, rivals, frenemies. I don't know. I mean, they kind of go together, but at the same time, they're glad to see each other, but at the same time, you know, well, he's there first. He first kind of consoles his friend, but then the friend's all, yeah, and I don't. What are you doing here? I see you didn't get one of those glamour jobs that takes you off to another world. And he's like, I'm no registered nothing. I don't know what am I gonna say. I don't have anything to tell anybody what I am. But just then they start getting into a fight, and the policeman breaks him up. And then there's this other guy who steps in and kind of helps out. And he hears him out, tells a little bit about the world. And George, he's thought about things, and he says, we really should do things differently. And he's asked his friend, this new guy he's met, who just kind of somehow happened to be around him the whole time that he was watching the competition, watching his friend not do so well, and finally get in this fight. And the other guy steps up, tells the policeman, "I'm in charge of him. Let's leave this alone." And, well, there's no harm, no foul, no charges. So the old guy just carries off George, and they have dinner. And then George says, "Look, I know what I can do. I can go on the screen and talk to a Novian, which I guess the Novian group is visiting the Earth because they're part of watching this and judging this competition." And they go on the view screen, or busy plate, whatever you want to call it. There you see George in the foreground, and in the background behind him is this new friend of his, a Ladislaus Ingenescu, who helps him connect up with this guy who is a Novian. And he tries to explain himself to the Novian with this idea that really makes a lot of sense. He says, why not just education in the slow way? Piece it in bit by bit. It may take longer, but you know a lot better. And the best thing is, once you do know all of this, you can learn the new stuff as it comes out, because it's a small tweak anyway. And the Novian thinks of that. What? You mean get educated without a programming tape to go straight into your brain? That's the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard. Ah, there he is laughing. Yeah. So that's it for the drawings, by the way. And it doesn't go anywhere. And I'm looking at that. I may not have that youthful ambition and all that, but on the other hand, experience and years of wisdom give me a slightly different view. Because George is all, well, he was doing pretty well until the guy said, and how long would it take for somebody to learn to be an expert metallurgist with a beam and machines going this way? And he says, well, I'm not sure. Maybe, I don't know. Well, look, maybe 5, 10 years, what? Let's say 5 years. So in the meantime, you got to keep this guy fed and housed and clothed, etc., while he's useless until finally he learns enough to be able to work the beaming machine. That's ridiculous. And then he has his laughter. George could have responded to this. Well, suppose you just had a habit of learning things on your own, a little bit. You could still go on the machine, have it educate you in the old Henslers, and then by using the habit of learning, you could just take everything you already know about the Hensler, thanks to the machine that puts it in your brain right away, and just add that little tiny supplement it takes to update what you know from the Hensler to the Beeman, or to the next machine as it comes out. And that way you could stay useful. So actually that could have been an excellent idea, but he didn't think of that on the spot. Maybe after the fact he might have thought of that, but the story doesn't say that. And they find out all of what's really going on, and again, he struggles once again. He's not sure what to make of this Ingenescu, and once again, has had enough of all this. He's ready to try to run, and once again, he meets up with these kinds of guys who again inject him and put him to sleep, and he wakes up again with the same roommate in the same room at the house of the feeble-minded. So, but there it's kind of finally begun to understand and to kind of explain what's going on and why things are the way they have to be, and actually why this means he has an excellent opportunity for something that most people don't get, and in fact most people don't even know about, and there's reasons for that. So it's very intense. It turns out he gets the best thing of all, and but I won't spoil the story. But it's a great read all the way through. You just want to pound the book or the screen or whatever. And how can they do that to him? That's so terrible. What kind of society can be that way? You know, until it gets to the end and you see, that's what they're doing. And that's what it means for good old George. There is a blurb here, okay, on the cover. Confession, a blurb by Isaac Asimov, and illustrated by Freyas, by the way. Freyas did this drawing, this artwork, and also did the cover. And the blurb says, some people just can't be taught, no matter what method you use. Even the education tape machine failed on some abnormal individuals. Well, probably not so much can't, but more like shouldn't. But okay. Turns out comparing this story in this text against the one as it appears when it got published in the book, when it gathered up into book form and published as the leading story and the longest, by the way, contained in 9 Tomorrows. So I only found 2 different changes. One had to do with this view screen or view busy plate, as they called it, where he talked to the Novian. Some places they call it a busy plate, and then to shorten, you get a little apostrophe and then plate, for short for busy plate. When they gathered it in the book, they took away the apostrophe. It's just a plate. He's looking at the plate, like a dinner plate. I don't know. I think the apostrophe actually kind of made sense. The only other change was to fix something where, at one point, and this is obviously some kind of a typo, instead of calling his good friend Inginescu Ladislas Inginescu, which is his name here, meaning behind his shoulder. Okay, as you can see him on the Novian's plate. For some reason, he got called Stanislaus Inginescu at one point. It's not Stanislas, it's Ladislas. That got corrected from the book. That's all that I found in terms of difference in the text. So, at any rate, that's where it first appeared, and like I said, it warranted the cover, and I absolutely agree with that. I think that's really one of his strongest stories. To me, it's probably one of my most favorites after maybe Foundation. So, anyway, I think it's a great story. I don't know that it showed up anywhere that 9 Tomorrows, but that makes 9 Tomorrows worth buying just for that story. Thanks for listening.